You know, usually when you bite into a fresh, crisp apple, right in the middle of a sweltering July afternoon,
Best feeling in the world.
right? Or when you roll up your sleeve to get a vaccine at your local clinic, there's just this underlying expectation of, well, simple inevitability.
Yeah, it's just there.
Exactly. You pay for the produce or the medicine, the transaction clears,
Yeah.
and the system just delivers it. We kind of treat it like flipping a light switch, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It feels completely automatic to the end consumer. I mean, the physical reality of getting it there is entirely abstracted away.
But then if you actually step back and look at that physical reality, it's wild. Like, how did that specific apple travel hundreds of miles from some orchard, sit in a distribution center, bounce along a hot highway, and wait on a supermarket shelf without just turning into brown mush?
Right. Or how that liquid vaccine remained molecularly stable for 3 weeks before it actually reached your arm.
Yes. Suddenly you realize that this quote-unquote automatic system is actually this staggering feat of thermodynamic engineering. I mean, we are relying on an infrastructure landscape that is completely invisible to most of us.
It's the absolute definition of a critical yet totally hidden nervous system for the modern world. We call it the cold chain.
The cold chain.
Yeah, think of it like a multi-stage relay race, but instead of passing a physical baton from runner to runner, the baton is an exact molecular temperature.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And if any runner in that chain drops the baton, even for like 10 minutes under the hot sun, the race is over. The vaccine degrades or the food spoils. It's just done.
And understanding how that relay race actually functions is our mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We're looking at the actual physical plumbing of our food and pharmaceutical networks.
Yep.
And to do that, we're focusing on a stack of industry analyses and market reports centered around an Indian company called ICEMAKE Refrigeration LTD, or ICEMAKE.
Which is really a brilliant focal point for this topic. I mean, they sit right at the collision point of a rapidly formalizing emerging economy and a strict biological necessity, which, is temperature control.
Yeah, and to set the parameters right out of the gate for you listening, we aren't talking about software today.
No apps, no digital platforms.
Right. We aren't looking at logistics tracking apps. ICEMAKE operates in a highly physical, unforgiving, project-based reality. I mean, they bend metal, they mix industrial chemicals.
Just execute on-site construction.
Exactly. And they export to about 24 different countries.
So this is very much a story about manufacturing at a physical scale and maintaining precise thermodynamic control across incredibly hostile environments.
So let's start with the basics. Because when someone says refrigeration, my mind instantly goes to that white box humming away in my kitchen.
Sure, the standard home fridge.
Yeah, imagine a company just stamping out home appliances.
Yeah.
But that is not the sandbox ICEMAKE plays in at all, is it?
Not even close. Kitchen appliances are purely consumer goods. ICEMAKE is in the business of industrial and commercial refrigeration infrastructure.
So heavy-duty stuff.
Very heavy-duty structural equipment. So, for instance, their foundation, like their core building block, is manufacturing PUF panels.
PUF panels. I saw that acronym all over reports. What exactly is a PUF panel, like, physically?
Okay, so PUF stands for polyurethane foam.
Right.
When you're trying to build an entire refrigerated warehouse, you can't just build a standard brick building and put a giant air conditioner inside.
Because the bricks just absorb the heat.
Exactly. Bricks absorb and transfer heat from the outside, so you have to build a highly specialized thermal envelope.
Okay.
And to make a PUF panel, they take 2 sheets of material, often pre-painted galvanized steel, and they literally inject a liquid chemical mixture between them.
Wait, liquid chemicals into the metal sheets?
Yeah, and an exothermic chemical reaction happens instantly. Those chemicals rapidly expand into a dense polyurethane foam, bonding intensely to the steel on both sides.
So the foam just cures and hardens inside that metal shell.
Precisely. And the secret to its insulation power is that the foam is packed with millions of microscopic closed cells that trap specific gases.
Oh, I see.
Because gas is a terrible conductor of heat compared to a solid, this panel basically becomes a thermal fortress. It physically blocks the ambient heat of a 45-degree Indian summer from penetrating the cold room.
It's almost like wrapping a building in a billion microscopic air mattresses just sandwiched between steel.
That is a surprisingly accurate way to visualize it, yeah.
Yeah.
So ICEMAKE manufactures these panels to build the literal walls and ceilings of cold storage facilities,
Got it.
but they also build the heavy cold room doors, which have to form a perfect hermetic seal. And then, of course, you have the actual cooling engines.
The parts that actually make it cold.
Right, the condensing units that sit outside and reject heat into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
and the enormous evaporator units that sit inside and absorb the heat from the room.
Now, the reports also mention some really specialized processing equipment. Things like blast chillers and blast freezers.
Yes, those are crucial.
And this is where I really want to understand the why. Like, why does a food processor need a specific blast freezer instead of just a really large normal freezer? Cold is just cold, isn't it?
Actually, no. The speed of the freezing process changes the fundamental cellular biology of the product.
Really? How so?
Let's take a strawberry.
Okay, what's strawberry?
If you put a strawberry in a normal, conventional freezer, the temperature drops slowly over many hours, and as water freezes slowly, it forms large, jagged ice crystals.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
Yeah, those large crystals act like microscopic knives. They physically puncture and tear the delicate cell walls of the strawberry from the inside.
Which is why when you thaw a normal frozen strawberry, it just turns into a puddle of mush.
Exactly. The structural integrity of the cells has been completely destroyed, so the cellular water just leaks out.
So how does a blast freezer fix that?
A blast freezer solves it by utilizing immense airflow and really aggressive refrigeration loops to pull the temperature of the product down extremely rapidly. We're talking sometimes within minutes or just a few hours.
Oh, that's fast.
Yeah, and because the freezing happens so fast, the water inside the food only has time to form microcrystals.
So they're too small to break the cell walls.
Precisely. These tiny crystals don't puncture anything. So when you thaw a blast-frozen piece of meat or fruit, it retains its texture, its moisture, and its structural integrity. It prevents that cellular damage and halts bacterial growth almost instantly.
That is fascinating. So a blast freezer isn't just about, saving time on the factory floor. It's fundamentally altering the physics of the preservation process to maintain commercial viability.
It is quite literally the difference between a high-value export product and unsellable waste.
Wow.
And beyond food, they also manufacture ripening chambers for agriculture, where they precisely control temperature and ethylene gas to ripen fruits like bananas uniformly.
Oh, so it's not just about keeping things cold, it's controlling the whole environment.
Exactly. They also build highly precise incubation chambers for the pharmaceutical industry.
So who is actually writing the checks for all this heavy equipment?
Yeah.
Because the end users seem to cover just a huge swath of the economy.
The client base is exceptionally diverse. You have the dairy sector, which requires bulk milk cooling tanks at village collection centers, and cheese processors who need strict humidity and temperature control.
Right.
You have the agricultural sector utilizing those ripening chambers we just talked about. You have pharmaceutical companies relying on those incubation chambers to store active pharmaceutical ingredients.
That's a lot of different industries.
And we haven't even mentioned the logistics sector buying refrigerated transport units, or commercial retail chains outfitting entire supermarkets with display counters and backroom storage.
And looking at their history, ICEMAKE has been operating since 1993, right? So over 3 decades, they've evolved into offering a full ecosystem.
They really have.
Like, they don't just sell you the engine, and they don't just sell you the insulated wall. They engineer and provide the entire end-to-end project.
Which is a vital strategic choice.
How so?
Because in industrial engineering, interfacing different components from different vendors is a nightmare.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, if the evaporator from vendor A doesn't perfectly sync with the insulation profile of the walls from vendor B, the compressor works way too hard, it burns out, and suddenly a warehouse full of vaccines is compromised.
Oh, wow. So you want one company handling the whole thing.
Exactly. By providing an integrated ecosystem, ICEMAKE shifts from being just a commoditized component supplier to an essential infrastructure partner. They own the entire thermal performance of the room.
Okay, so now that we understand the physical reality of what they're manufacturing, let's look at the sheer scale of the landscape they're building it for.
It's vast.
Yeah, the numbers in these reports are colossal, but I want to make sure we are contextualizing them correctly for you listening. The total addressable market, or TAM, needs to be viewed in layers, right?
It absolutely does. We have to start wide and then narrow down.
Okay, let's start wide.
At the global macro level, the overall cold chain market was valued at $411.9 $411.95 billion US dollars in 2024.
411.95 billion. Okay.
That is the entire planetary spend on temperature-controlled logistics and storage.
A staggering number. But IceMake is an Indian company, right? They're deeply rooted in the domestic market, even though they do export.
Yeah.
What does their home turf look like?
So zooming into their primary geography, the India cold chain market was valued at 2,052.7 billion rupees in 2024.
Over 2,000 billion rupees.
Yes, and the projections are incredibly aggressive. The market is expected to hit 5,596.9 billion rupees by 2032.
Okay, wait, I have to throw a flag on the play here.
Go ahead.
A 5.6 trillion rupee market by 2032 sounds like one of those pie-in-the-sky numbers that companies just put in pitch decks to sound impressive.
I get why you'd say that.
Because, look, IceMake manufactures the actual metal panels and the cooling equipment, right? They don't buy the land for the warehouses, they don't own the fleets of trucks, and they certainly aren't paying the salaries of the logistics drivers, so they don't own that entire 5.6 trillion rupee pie.
That is a crucial distinction, and you are absolutely right to isolate their actual slice of the pie. The 2,052.7 billion rupee figure represents the entire ecosystem spend.
Right.
So that includes the prime commercial real estate, the fuel for the transport vehicles, the specialized labor, the inventory management software, and the logistics services.
All the stuff IceMake doesn't do.
Exactly. IceMake's actual serviceable obtainable market is solely the physical equipment and the integrated systems portion of that wider ecosystem.
So it's kind of like the difference between the total cost of building a new housing development versus the money spent specifically on just the bricks and the plumbing.
Precisely. The equipment market is a fraction of the total ecosystem, but it is still highly lucrative.
Give me an example.
Well, look at just one subsegment they operate in, the global ice maker market.
Just the machines that make commercial ice.
Just the machines. That narrow vertical alone is valued between 4.6 and 4.98 billion US dollars globally.
Wow.
And roughly 41% of that demand is driven entirely by the food service and hospitality sector.
So let's ground this in IceMake's actual financials. In the fiscal year 2025, they reported a total operating income of 479.56 crores.
Correct.
If they're pulling in roughly 480 crores in the domestic market, that, even just on the equipment side, is worth tens of thousands of crores. Well, they are currently a very small fish in a breathtakingly vast ocean.
They are. They are a rapidly growing player with a revenue base in the hundreds of crores, but operating within an addressable industry measured in the thousands of crores.
The headroom is huge.
The ceiling for their growth is phenomenally high. And what makes it so attractive is that the penetration rate of modern cold chain infrastructure in India, outside of large corporate conglomerates, remains surprisingly low.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there is a vast unorganized sector that still relies on incredibly primitive cooling methods.
Which actually brings us to the core engine of demand. The room to grow is clearly there, but what is forcing the hand of these businesses right now?
Right.
Like, why is a mid-sized regional dairy processor suddenly deciding, hey, we need to spend 1 crore on a new blast chilling setup today, when they didn't care 5 years ago? What are the structural forces propelling this industry?
It is a convergence of several macro forces that are making temperature control a completely non-negotiable business expense.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first, and perhaps the largest, is food loss reduction combined with strict food safety regulations.
Because a lot of food just goes bad.
Historically, a substantial percentage of agricultural and dairy output in emerging markets spoils before it ever reaches a consumer.
Just literally rotting in transit because it's sitting in the back of an open truck in 35-degree heat.
Exactly. Because the bacterial growth curve in ambient heat is exponential. It's not linear, it's exponential.
Right.
So as the food supply chain modernizes and formalizes, there is a hard regulatory and commercial shift. You simply cannot secure a vendor contract with a modern, organized supermarket chain unless you can digitally prove that your product never broke the cold chain.
So the buyers are demanding it.
Yes. Informal ambient temperature handling is just being regulated out of existence.
And I imagine urbanization acts as a huge accelerant for that.
Absolutely it does.
Because as populations shift from rural areas to dense cities,
Yeah.
the physical distance between where food is grown and where it is actually eaten just expands.
And the diet fundamentally changes too.
Right. Urban consumers lean heavily into processed, packaged, and ready-to-eat foods.
Exactly. A heavy urban diet of chilled dairy, frozen vegetables, and processed meats requires a continuous chain. You need blast chilling at the factory, refrigerated transport on the highways, and extensive display refrigeration at the retail level.
Then you have the healthcare and pharmaceutical side of the equation, which honestly feels like an entirely different beast compared to frozen peas.
It is a completely different risk profile. The pharmaceutical sector represents an essential, non-discretionary spend.
Because you can't mess around with medicine.
Think about modern biologics, advanced therapies, and vaccines. These are complex, fragile protein structures. If they get too warm, the proteins denature.
Eyes break down.
They physically unravel and become totally useless.
So a restaurant owner going through a tough quarter might look at their capital expenditure budget and decide, you know what, we can limp along with the old ice maker for another 12 months.
Right, they can take that risk.
But a pharmaceutical distributor doesn't have that luxury.
They cannot cut corners. A pharma logistics provider cannot delay upgrading a failing incubation chamber because a temperature excursion doesn't just mean a bad tasting product.
It means fines.
Fines, product recalls, and potentially life-threatening failures in medical efficacy. The compliance requirements laid down by health ministries are absolute.
The environment itself is also actively conspiring against these supply chains. I noticed the market research specifically highlights climate change and rising ambient temperatures as a major driver for refrigeration equipment.
Well, thermodynamics dictate that heat always flows to cold.
Always.
The hotter the outside ambient temperature, the harder a cold room has to work to maintain its internal state.
Makes sense.
So in markets like India, where summer temperatures are aggressively rising, older, less efficient cooling equipment simply fails. It physically cannot reject the heat fast enough.
So they have to upgrade.
Upgrading to high-efficiency industrial cooling is no longer a luxury to extend shelf life slightly. It is a rigid necessity just to stay in business during a heat wave.
And how does digital technology play into this? Because for a company that bends metal and pours foam, the sources mention some surprising tech tailwinds.
This is where the digital nervous system overlays the physical infrastructure. ICEMAKE highlights the growing adoption of IoT, the Internet of Things, and augmented reality for logistics monitoring.
Like smart sensors.
Exactly. A modern cold room isn't just cold anymore, it's smart. Operators are forced to upgrade because clients demand real-time digital logs of the temperature.
So you can't fake it.
Right. A sensor inside the PUF panel transmits data every minute to a cloud dashboard. If the temperature shifts by a single degree, the system alerts the manager before the goods are ruined.
So the macro forces, food formalization, urbanization, strict pharma compliance, climate change, and IoT integration, those are undeniable. But how does ICEMAKE translate those high-level global trends into a specific catalog of products? Let's walk through their playbook segment by segment.
Sure. The most accurate way to analyze their portfolio is not to look at it as one homogeneous product line, but really as a bundle of distinct submarkets.
Okay.
Each segment has entirely different economics, different customer behaviors, and different levels of industry maturity. First, you have their core infrastructure play, cold rooms and storage.
These are the large-scale project-driven warehouses, right? The big PUF panel builds serving food, dairy, and pharma distribution hubs.
Yes, the heavy structural foundations of the cold chain. But then we move earlier in the life cycle to their pre-cooling and mobile pre-cooling segment. This is designed for farm-to-market freshness.
What exactly is pre-cooling doing that a normal cold room doesn't? I mean, why the distinction?
It addresses a concept called field heat.
Field heat.
Yeah. When you harvest a crop, say grapes or mangoes, that fruit has been sitting in the blazing sun all day long.
So it's physically hot.
It holds a tremendous amount of latent thermal energy, and that heat accelerates the internal biological ripening and decay processes.
Oh, I see.
If you just throw warm fruit into a standard cold room, it takes days to cool down, and by then, the shelf life is already compromised.
Plus, putting tons of hot fruit into a cold room would completely overwhelm the room's compressors, wouldn't it?
Exactly. It's a huge thermal load. Pre-cooling utilizes specialized high-velocity forced air or hydrocooling to strip that field heat out of the freshly harvested crop in a matter of hours.
Wow, that fast.
Yeah, it locks in the quality immediately right at the farm gate. However, the data notes that this specific segment is still developing.
Why is it lagging if the science is so obviously clear?
Because the agricultural supply chain in India remains highly fragmented at the farm level. You have millions of smallholder farmers who just lack the capital to invest in sophisticated pre-cooling infrastructure.
Oh, right. The farms are too small.
The technology is totally proven, but the commercial adoption is bottlenecked by the fragmented nature of the farming sector.
That makes sense. Moving further down the chain, we talked earlier about blast chilling and freezing. Yeah. This is targeted directly at the organized food processors, right?
Hmm.
Like the companies turning raw agriculture into packaged consumer goods or export-grade commodities.
Yes, and this segment is much more mature than farm-level pre-cooling because these processors actually have the capital and the strict buyer mandates to justify the equipment.
Right.
Then we have refrigerated vans, which are absolutely essential for maintaining continuity in transit.
Because the whole chain is useless without them.
Exactly. You can have a state-of-the-art cold room at the farm and a perfect display fridge at the supermarket, but if the truck connecting them is just an insulated box with a block of ice,
The chain breaks.
the chain breaks. Yet, despite that obvious necessity, the penetration of actual mechanically refrigerated transport remains quite low compared to the sheer volume of perishables moving across the country.
Really? That seems like a huge gap.
It is a significant weak link in the national infrastructure, but it also represents a substantial runway for future growth, as logistics operators are essentially forced to upgrade their fleets.
Now, here is a data point from the reports that genuinely caught my attention.
Oh.
Yeah, it details a newer division for them, display counters and continuous panels. The timeline shows they just made this facility operational in November 2024.
Right, very recently.
But it already represented roughly 5% of their total sales for the fiscal year 2025,
It did.
generating 5% of total company revenue from a brand new launch in just a few months. That implies some serious pent-up market demand.
It really does. Let's break down what that division actually does.
Yeah, please.
The display counters are what the industry calls visicoolers. Those upright glass door commercial refrigerators you see in literally every convenience store, supermarket, and pharmacy.
The ones you grab a cold drink out of.
Exactly. They are the final touch point before the consumer buys the product.
Highly standardized, high-volume units.
Yes. And the continuous panels refer to a modernized manufacturing method for their PUF panels.
How does that differ from the old way?
Instead of injecting foam into individual panel molds one by one in a batch process, a continuous panel line uses an automated moving conveyor system.
Oh, so it just keeps going.
It continuously pours foam between unrolling sheets of steel, cutting the finished panels to length at the very end of the line. It drastically increases manufacturing throughput and consistency.
So they essentially built a high-speed factory dedicated to the building blocks of cold rooms and the retail fridges at the end of the line. And the market just soaked up the output immediately.
Yeah, the rapid revenue contribution indicates that when ICEMAKE brings targeted, high-quality capacity online, they aren't really struggling to find buyers. The demand is just waiting for the supply.
Which perfectly illustrates the complexity of their business. I mean, they are selling complex pre-cooling systems to agricultural cooperatives, heavy blast freezers to factory engineers, and standardized glass fridges to retail chains.
It's a very wide net.
The adoption speeds, the buyer priorities, and the sales cycles are completely divergent.
And navigating that matrix requires a very specific set of competitive advantages. You cannot survive in that many different arenas with just a good sales pitch.
So how does a company like ICEMAKE actually defend its turf, especially in an industrial sector where they have to compete against, massive, deeply capitalized multinational engineering firms? What is their armor and where are the weak spots?
Let's analyze the competitive moats outlined in the ratings and market reports. Their first, and arguably most durable advantage, is their ecosystem approach, combined with OEM original equipment manufacturer capabilities.
Basically being the one-stop shop.
Yes. If a logistics company is building a huge distribution hub, they want a single throat to choke if something goes wrong.
Makes sense.
They don't want to hire a panel supplier, a separate compressor manufacturer, a different door fabricator, and an independent installation crew.
Too many moving parts.
Way too many. When ICEMAKE provides the entire engineered package, it drastically reduces the execution risk for the client.
And building that comprehensive capability isn't something a well-funded startup can just replicate in 6 months, right?
No, it requires decades of accumulated engineering know-how, vendor qualifications, and a lot of trial and error in application engineering.
You had to earn those stripes.
That creates a substantial barrier to entry. And this directly feeds into their second major moat, brand trust.
Because they've been around since 1993.
In industrial refrigeration, historical reliability is the ultimate currency. We discussed the stakes earlier.
Yeah, the Reuven vaccines and stuff.
Exactly. If an agricultural processor has 20 million rupees worth of processed mango pulp sitting in a cold room, and the refrigeration system fails during a 45-degree heat wave,
They lose the inventory.
they lose the inventory, they lose the buyer contract, and they might literally lose their business.
So they aren't going to gamble on an unproven equipment supplier just to save, what, 5% on the initial capital expenditure?
Not a chance. Brand trust here isn't about having a slick logo. It is about proving over 30 years that your welded seams don't crack, your compressors don't burn out, and your PUF panels don't delaminate when the environment is aggressively hostile.
That track record is everything.
Care Ratings explicitly cites their established clientele and the vast experience of the promoters as a core positive for the company's risk profile.
Okay, so they have breadth of product and historical trust. What about cost? Do they have a structural pricing advantage over the competition?
They do possess a cost advantage stemming from their growing manufacturing scale. They operate multiple plants in Gujarat, including a recently added unit in Bhavla.
Okay.
As they push more volume through these consolidated facilities, they get better absorption of their fixed overheads. It's a classic operating leverage dynamic. However,
Here comes the but.
yeah, this is precisely where their armor becomes notably thin.
Thin what way? If they have scale, shouldn't their costs be lower?
Their internal costs might be optimized, but the external industry dynamic is characterized by intense fragmentation and high competitive intensity.
Lots of small players.
There are countless regional, unorganized players who avoid taxes, ignore environmental compliance, and just severely undercut on price.
A race to the bottom on bidding.
Furthermore, the ratings reports make it explicitly clear that ICEMAKE only has a partial ability to pass input cost increases onto their clients for newly bagged orders.
Really?
Yeah, if the global price of steel or chemical polyurethane precursors spikes suddenly, ICEMAKE cannot simply dictate a new higher price to the market without losing bids.
Because those unorganized players will swoop in.
Exactly. Their cost advantage is real, but it is fragile and highly sensitive to raw material cycles.
I actually want to push back on another supposed advantage listed in their materials.
Go for it.
The sources mention a quote-unquote technology advantage anchored by an experienced research and development department.
Okay.
Now, in an industry that fundamentally revolves around bending steel, injecting foam, and running pretty standard thermodynamic refrigeration cycles, is their R&D actually a defensible moat? Or is that just, standard corporate marketing speak?
That is a very astute observation, and your skepticism is totally warranted. We have to separate application engineering from proprietary patented technology. ICEMAKE is highly skilled at application engineering. They can design a bespoke ammonia cooling loop to perfectly fit the unique floor plan and thermal load of a specific dairy factory. That takes significant R&D talent.
Sure, but they haven't invented a fundamentally new law of physics.
Precisely. The evidence for a widening proprietary technology gap, like holding exclusive patents on some revolutionary new compressor design that major global competitors cannot match, is very weak.
So the reports don't back that up.
The third-party analytical reports validate their scale, their diversification, and their execution capabilities, but they do not highlight proprietary tech as the core driver of their market position.
Got it.
Their R&D supports excellent execution, but it is unproven as a standalone impenetrable moat against large multinationals.
Okay, so if we strip away the marketing, their core competitive identity is basically built on reliable execution, 3 decades of trust, and the sheer convenience of integrated project delivery.
That's a fair summary.
And understanding that leads us directly to the most practical question of this entire deep dive. How do these physical machines actually translate into rupees on the balance sheet?
The money part.
Exactly. Let's break down the operational economics of ICEMAKE.
To understand their financials, we first have to really understand the revenue model. This is fundamentally a project-led and shipment-driven business.
Right.
It is vital to contrast this with something like software, where you build the code once and license it infinitely with near zero marginal cost.
With ICEMAKE, every single rupee they earn requires physical atoms to be manipulated, assembled, and shipped.
Exactly. Their revenue scales through 3 primary mechanisms. First is the sheer volume of units dispatched.
Just selling more stuff.
Second is pricing and realizations, how much they can actually charge per unit in that competitive bidding environment. And third is their product mix.
Let's double click on product mix for a second. Why does that matter so much to their bottom line?
Because the margins and revenue profiles vary wildly across their catalog.
Oh, I see.
Selling a batch of standardized Visi coolers to a convenience store chain is a high volume but lower margin transaction.
'Cause it's a commodity, sort of.
Right. Conversely, engineering, building, and commissioning a custom ammonia refrigeration system for an industrial meat processor is a high-ticket, higher-margin, very complex project.
But if they're so heavily reliant on these large custom projects tied to industrial construction cycles, doesn't that make their revenue incredibly lumpy?
What do you mean?
Like a pharmaceutical giant builds a new distribution hub, ICEMAKE gets a payout. But what happens the next month when no one is building a warehouse?
You've just identified the inherent friction of the whole model. This business is intensely thirsty for working capital.
Walk me through that.
Let's walk through the physical life cycle of a single rupee in their operations.
Okay.
On day one, IceMake has to lay out cash to buy raw materials: polyurethane chemicals, steel coils, copper tubing, aluminum fins. They have to pay the electricity to run the factory, and they have to pay the labor to build the equipment.
All of which happens way before the equipment even leaves the loading dock.
Long before. Then they ship it to the client site, and often their own teams have to spend weeks actually installing and commissioning it.
Wow.
Only after the project is completely signed off does the client release the final milestone payments. They are effectively floating the cost of construction for their clients.
So they are basically acting as a short-term bank for the project.
In many ways, yes, which is why their financial success relies so heavily on high asset turnover and rapid order execution.
They need to move fast.
They need a continuous flywheel effect. If they utilize their manufacturing plants at high capacity, they absorb those fixed overhead costs beautifully. The cost per unit drops.
But if that flywheel stutters,
If a client delays a project or a supply chain snag holds up a critical component, the drag is immediate. Finished inventory just sits in the warehouse tying up cash. Receivables stretch out from 60 days to 90 days or even more. That drag severely compresses their profit margins.
speaking of margins, the reports mentioned Care Ratings expects a P-build margin of around 8% for the fiscal year 2026.
Right.
And for you listening, if you aren't deep in the financial weeds, P-build-D is essentially the operating profit, what is left over from revenue after paying all the direct operational costs of making the product, but before paying interest to the bank, taxes to the government, or accounting for equipment depreciation.
Yes, it's the core operating margin. And an 8% margin tells us a very specific story.
What's the story?
It shows that while the business is fundamentally viable and profitable, the breathing room is tight. There is not a lot of slack in the system.
8% isn't huge.
No, they cannot afford inefficiencies in manufacturing, and they really cannot afford severe miscalculations in their competitive bidding.
So the business model is proven, but it demands relentless operational discipline just to maintain that single-digit margin. To push past that and to truly scale, management has mapped out a highly aggressive growth strategy. They have publicly stated a target of reaching 1,000 crores in revenue by the fiscal year 2027-28.
And to put that in perspective, they reported roughly 480 crores in FY25.
So they want to double.
They are aiming to more than double the size of the company in a span of about 3 years.
How exactly does a heavy manufacturing company double its physical output that quickly? What are the specific levers they're pulling?
Management has outlined a clear 4-pillar roadmap to hit that 1,000 crore mark.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first pillar is pure capacity expansion. We discussed their state-of-the-art continuous panel and visicooler plant in Ahmedabad.
The automated one.
Yes. By fully utilizing that new high-speed automated capacity, they expect that facility alone to contribute roughly 100 crores to their top line in FY26. They're actively removing the production bottlenecks that previously throttled their growth.
Okay, so they have a factory pumping out panels at high speed in Gujarat. That solves the supply issue in the West.
Right.
But India is an immense geography. Trying to truck massive insulated panels from Ahmedabad all the way down to Chennai or Bangalore sounds like an expensive logistical nightmare.
It is, which leads directly to their second pillar, new geographies.
Spreading out.
Historically, IceMake has been heavily concentrated in Western India. To scale to 1,000 crores efficiently, they are aggressively pushing into the South Indian market, likely aiming to establish local manufacturing or assembly footholds just to bypass those prohibitive freight costs.
Makes total sense.
They're also actively exploring export markets to diversify away from purely domestic economic cycles.
It's the classic regional to national playbook. What is the third pillar?
New products. This is where they target higher margins, specialized engineering verticals. And the most significant move here is their entry into large-scale ammonia refrigeration systems.
We've mentioned ammonia a few times today.
Yeah.
Why is a company known for Freon-style refrigeration suddenly pushing into ammonia? Like, what makes it so special?
It basically comes down to pure thermodynamics. Ammonia, chemically known as NH3, is one of the oldest and most efficient refrigerants in existence. It has an incredibly high latent heat of vaporization.
Let's break that down for a second. Latent heat of vaporization.
Sure. It means that when liquid ammonia absorbs heat and boils into a gas, it absorbs a huge amount of thermal energy compared to synthetic refrigerants.
Oh, okay.
It pulls heat out of a room far more efficiently. So for large industrial applications like a sprawling mega dairy or a gigantic cold storage warehouse ammonia systems, use significantly less electricity over their lifespan.
And electricity is often the largest ongoing operational cost for these cold storage facilities.
By far. So ICEMAKE is shifting upmarket to capture this demand. The sources note they are already bidding for 60 crores worth of projects in the ammonia space, and they're targeting firm orders of 20 crores in the near term.
Wow, so they're already moving on it.
Yes, and alongside ammonia, they're also expanding into manufacturing reefer vans and developing dry containers for transport logistics, broadening their whole logistics portfolio.
Which brings us to the fourth pillar.
Ecosystem expansion, specifically through vertical integration.
What are they integrating?
They are setting up a new internal coil manufacturing unit. The coils are the critical copper and aluminum heat exchangers inside the evaporators and condensers.
The actual guts of the cooling unit.
Right. By manufacturing these in-house rather than buying them from external vendors, they capture that component margin and gain way tighter control over their supply chain timelines.
When you lay it all out, the automated panel plants, the geographic expansion, the heavy ammonia engineering, the vertical integration, they're essentially trying to evolve from a reliable regional equipment specialist into a national vertically integrated industrial powerhouse for anything related to temperature control.
That is the goal.
But is this target actually credible? It's easy to put 1,000 crores on a PowerPoint slide.
The ambition is steep, no doubt, but the credibility of the target is really anchored in the macro environment we discussed.
The tailwinds.
The tailwinds of formalization are real. The Indian government is actively pushing policies, subsidies, and infrastructure mandates for mega food parks and pharmaceutical hubs.
So the money is flowing into the sector.
This regulatory environment creates a structural, durable advantage for organized, compliant scale players like ICEMAKE over the fragmented local workshops. The demand pool is genuinely there. The challenge is entirely a matter of execution.
And scaling an industrial business from a regional SME to a national mid-cap is fraught with hidden hazards.
Oh, absolutely.
The gears can jam in many ways. What are the icebergs in the water for ICEMAKE? Like, what are the specific risk factors that could just derail this 1,000 crore trajectory?
The market analyses explicitly outline several significant risks. The most immediate and volatile threat is input cost volatility.
Raw materials.
Right. Roughly 75% of their total operating costs are tied directly to raw materials.
And we aren't talking about materials with stable pricing, are we?
Not at all. The chemical precursors for the polyurethane foam, the polyols and diisocyanates, are derivatives of crude oil.
Oh, so they move with oil prices.
Their pricing fluctuates wildly with global petrochemical markets and geopolitical events. Additionally, they consume vast quantities of industrial metals: steel for the panels, copper for the refrigeration coils, aluminum for the fins.
So if there is a supply chain shock or crude oil spikes due to a conflict somewhere, their cost of goods sold skyrockets almost overnight.
Exactly. And remember that tight 8% operating margin we talked about?
Yep.
A sudden spike in crude oil or copper prices directly and immediately compresses that margin because, as we established, intense competition limits their ability to pass those costs on to the customer.
Which is the second major risk: intense competition.
The industrial machinery sector in India is completely unforgiving. The reports highlight that over the past year, ICEMAKE's stock actually underperformed the broader Indian machinery industry index by roughly 19.6%.
Oh, really? 19% underperformance.
Yeah. Stiff competition from both nimble, unorganized players and deep-pocketed multinationals severely restricts their pricing power. They have to fight for every single contract.
The third risk mentioned is cyclicality and concentration.
Yes, being so heavily reliant on the Western region, specifically the operations clustered around Ahmedabad, means a localized economic slowdown or even a regional power grid issue or localized labor disruptions could disproportionately impact their top line.
Oh, putting all their eggs in one basket.
That is why the push into South India is so critical. It dilutes that geographic concentration risk.
But the fourth risk is arguably the most complex from an engineering standpoint. Regulatory risks specifically tied to their new growth engine, ammonia refrigeration.
Yes, because ammonia, while thermodynamically brilliant, is incredibly dangerous.
How dangerous.
It is highly toxic, highly corrosive, and mildly flammable under certain conditions.
Wow, okay.
Unlike Freon, which is relatively inert if it leaks, an ammonia leak in an enclosed factory can literally be fatal to the workers.
That's a massive liability.
Furthermore, ammonia aggressively corrodes copper, meaning the entire refrigeration loop has to be engineered using heavy-duty steel or specialized alloys.
So it's a double-edged sword.
Very much so.
Ammonia gives them access to these large, high-value industrial contracts because of its energy efficiency. But it introduces an entirely new layer of environmental, safety, and compliance risk.
Right.
An engineering failure or a regulatory hurdle could stall a project entirely and result in huge liabilities. It is high reward, but incredibly high stakes.
It requires a level of engineering rigor that leaves zero room for error. So given these substantial risks, cost volatility, fierce competition, and toxic chemicals, why hasn't the company stumbled? How do they actually navigate this minefield?
Well, the analysis shows they employ active multi-supplier sourcing strategies and raw material hedging to try and smooth out the commodity price spikes. But their real superpower against these external shocks lies in their balance sheet.
Yes, the balance sheet. Post-IPO, the company maintains zero net debt.
Zero net debt. That is a structural game changer in heavy manufacturing.
It changes the operational mathematics entirely. When a company is highly leveraged, carrying a large debt load, a sudden spike in steel prices or a delayed project can cause a cash flow crisis.
Which leads to missed interest payments.
Exactly, leading to existential distress. Because ICEMAKE has zero net debt, they don't have those crushing interest obligations.
That's huge.
They can absorb a temporary margin compression from an oil spike. They can afford to bid competitively on strategic projects to maintain market share without worrying about the bankers knocking on the door. It provides enormous operational ballast.
Taking all of this together, the ambitious 1,000 crore target, the tight margins reliant on raw materials, the aggressive capacity expansion, and the structural risks, how has the company actually performed in the recent past? Where does the rubber meet the road on their financials?
The recent financial realities present a textbook picture of a company in a heavy transition phase. Looking at the full fiscal year 2025, their total operating income grew by a very healthy 26.72% year-on-year, reaching 479.56 crores.
So the top-line volume is growing, the market is buying what they're building. But what happened to the profitability?
The margins took a noticeable hit. Their PBILD margin dropped from 10.30% in FY24 down to 8.89% in FY25.
And that compression is a direct result of bearing the upfront costs of scaling, right?
Absolutely.
They're absorbing the startup costs and the initial inefficiencies of bringing the new continuous panel facility online, alongside the fluctuations in raw materials.
Exactly. It is the cost of building for the future. But if you look at the very recent quarterly data, we see signs of stabilization and recovery.
That's good news.
In the second quarter of FY25, consolidated revenue hit 147.49 crores, which is a 43% jump year-on-year. Crucially, they returned to profitability after a prior loss-making quarter.
And moving into the first half of FY26, total operating income rose to 259.20 crores, showing that the revenue momentum is sustaining.
They're also making moves at the leadership level to navigate this complex growth phase. The reports mention the appointment of a new CEO, Mr. M. Srinivas Reddy, in November 2025.
Bringing in external professional management to complement the long tenure of the promoter.
Yeah.
It's a classic evolution when a company transitions from a founder-led regional SME into a professionally managed national mid-cap.
It is a clear signal that they recognize the operational complexity of scaling to 1,000 crores requires a different structural approach. They're in a distinct growth with ramp-up phase.
Right.
The top-line revenue is exploding because they're winning projects, adding capacity, and riding the macro tailwinds.
But the key watch point for anyone analyzing this company over the next 2 years is simple. Can they convert this expanding revenue scale into stable, long-term profitability?
That's the million-dollar question.
Can they get that new automated factory running so efficiently that the margins creep back up into the double digits?
That is the ultimate test. They are expanding their physical footprint faster than their margins can currently keep up. But management's capital allocation strategy is highly transparent.
It is. They are relentlessly focused on operational reinvestment. They are pouring their generated cash back into capacity expansion, new manufacturing lines, and vertical integration, rather than trying to engineer short-term financial returns through buybacks or dividends.
They are physically building the infrastructure required to support a 1,000 crore business.
They are playing a very long game in an industry that demands deep physical roots and immense capital commitment.
It really fundamentally alters the lens through which we view the physical world around us.
It really does.
To briefly retrace the journey we've taken today, we started at the sun-baked farm gate, exploring the physics of field heat and pre-cooling.
We moved through the cellular biology of blast freezing, the chemistry of polyurethane foam panels, and the thermodynamics of ammonia refrigeration.
We've seen how a company like ICEMAKE serves as the essential picks and shovels provider for a booming temperature-controlled infrastructure rollout.
Yeah.
They are bending the metal and mixing the chemicals to build the hidden plumbing that allows a rapidly modernizing economy to safely feed, treat, and sustain its population.
And they are executing this while navigating a brutal gauntlet of intense market competition, volatile crude oil and metal costs, and the operational friction of scaling heavy manufacturing across a vast country.
It highlights the staggering complexity required just to maintain the baseline of modern convenience.
So true. So as we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with a final thought experiment. Think back to that white refrigerator humming away in your kitchen, the appliance you rely on every single day to keep your milk from spoiling and your vegetables crisp.
Right, the one we all ignore.
You expect it to run perfectly, without a second thought, for years on end.
A total miracle of localized thermodynamics that we take entirely for granted.
Exactly. Now, try to imagine the engineering, the capital, and the operational sheer force of will required to scale that exact level of precision and reliability to a nationwide network.
Mind-boggling.
Imagine scaling it to speeding transport trucks, bouncing over uneven highways, to sprawling multi-acre warehouses holding millions of dollars of delicate vaccines, and to highly regulated ammonia-cooled industrial factories operating in 40-degree heat.
When you scale the concept of a kitchen fridge to the size of a continent, the difficulty multiplier is astronomical.
How much of our modern lifestyle, our fundamental food security, our baseline medical safety, our daily dietary convenience is entirely, completely dependent on this invisible, temperature-controlled web that we never even look at.
Most of it.
It forces you to realize that modern life isn't magic. It's just phenomenally good engineering. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface.